that's being done by the two consortiums. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And what we're going to go over today is a few things. The first one is an overview of OFA. Mike will bring that to us, talking about what OFA is, kind of the work they're trying to do. And then we'll move on to the Gen Z side, where Hiren will come on board and talk to us about Gen Z, the goals that they have and what they're doing. And then finally, we're going to get into a chat or a panel where Mike and Hiren will be joined by Erich and Russ, Phil, and Richelle to talk about the overall goal of what is going on with the two consortiums, other people that are involved in it, and how you might get involved and why you might want to get involved. And then we'll close with a quick Q&A session. So let's go to the next slide and I'll introduce all the players. First, let me introduce Mike Aguilar. He is from the Open Fabrics Alliance and is the Senior Computer Scientist for HPC Research and Development at Sandia National Labs. We have Hiren Patel, who is the GenZ Consortium President and also the CEO of IntelliProp. Phil Cayton is the Open Fabrics Alliance member as well as the Senior Engineer or Senior Staff Engineer at Intel. Russ Herrell is joining us from HPE, also a Gen Z member, where he is the system architect. And then another Gen Z member, Erich Hanke, is joining us. He also works in IntelliProp with Hiren and is a senior principal engineer there. Richelle Alvers is a number of things, right? She's on the OFA. She's also a SNIA board member, and then is a storage technology architect for Intel. My name is Kurtis Bowman. I'm moderating this panel today. I am the treasurer of the Gen Z Consortium and director of server performance at AMD. So did want to give just a little bit of history as we get into this. OFA has been around for quite some time, outstanding organization. And as Gen Z was forming, OFA reached out to us and said, hey, we know you're new and you're young, but you're a fabric and we're an Open Fabric Alliance. We'd like to be able to work with you a little bit. And they invited us to actually present a little bit on Gen Z at a conference that they were having in Austin. And it really started a nice relationship between the two organizations. And as we got further along and actually had things to be able to work on and demos that we could use, we quickly got into a conversation with Mike on, hey, there's this idea of a fabric manager. You need one. We'd like to make one that's usable across a number of things. And that's what started this going. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But right now, actually, let me hand off to Mike and have him talk to you about the Open Fabrics Alliance.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to kind of go over what the Open Fabrics Management Framework means to us. Next slide. Why create so I'm going to go over why create a new fabric manager framework, who's all involved in the project, how we're building it, short-term task-related timeframes, and next steps. Next slide. Okay, here we go. So the question is, why create a new fabric management framework? And so we have a lot of new HPC and cloud computing designs, 8 new workloads, and new fabrics and new ways of deploying memory. Those are customized to make the computations faster and improve efficiency. And there's a lot of different new fabrics, and we wanted to find a way to make things easier for customers and clients and fabric providers to do to put out the type of work that they want to put out for their type of computing platforms. And so with the new Fabric Manager, we're trying to make things easier so that people can more effectively connect to the computing platform and make things easier to deploy. Next slide. So right now there's no common fabric management framework. So people have to make their HPC systems and their cloud systems and other computing systems. They have to do things in more of a static way that's following the same methods that they've always used. It's not as efficient for building things out, and it's more complicated. And we think we're going to make things easier by putting this framework together. They can come up with new ideas and deploy them easier. We have different, as you can see in the slide here, we have different, all kinds of different fabrics. We've got Ethernet, IB, GenZ, other proprietary ones coming in. There's a lot of different fabrics, and it's hard to deploy things with Kubernetes, Slurm, and we want to make things easier, add security and things like that to the frameworks. So next slide. So with the new framework, we think we can add poly instantiation for security. We can add things like multiple fabrics. We can subdivide fabrics. We can add something that agents for the fabrics providers can connect to, and people can pull for information on the fabrics, makes things a little easier. Without a fabric management framework, every tool provides a unique call, and they have to go, for instance, if you're using GenZ or Infiniband, you'd have to make a fabric management framework stack for each type of fabric. And with the same centralized fabric, you can use the same calls, same tools, and everything works the same way. For instance, Redfish and Swordfish are the underlying methods, the tools that we're using for the fabric management framework. And with Redfish and Swordfish, everything becomes more easily the same across all the types of fabrics. Next slide. So when you need to attach like memory or accelerator cards and to those are considered resources, and you need to connect them to like a computing client. You can go out to the OFMF and find available resources and connect to them in new novel ways. And everything, if you have an issue or if something gets disconnected, you can actually find a different way to reattach that same resource. And also, like I said, you can provide security so that people have subdivided networks, and they can have multiple people on there with different security levels. Next slide. So for instance, examples of the fabric management frameworks offered, you can have partitioning, you can do inventory of the fabrics, resources, connections. You can do partitioning, like I said, you can partition fabrics up based on security or our needs. You can also do events. You can find out if there's issues with each fabric and then make adjustments to that. And then you can also provide security. Next slide. Who's all working with it together on this? Obviously, GenZ and Open Fabrics, we're working with DMTF and SNIA. They're providing Redfish and Swordfish. We're planning on targeting to other types of fabrics, for instance, InfiniBand, Ethernet, and other fabrics like Slingshot. Next slide. So companies and entities involved, the Gen-Z Consortium, Open Fabrics Alliance, my employer, Sandia, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Intel, Livermore, Red Hat. There's IntelliProp. There's a lot of people involved, DMTF and SNIA. Next slide. We're short-term time frame tasks. We're planning on having a presence at SC21. We're planning on doing a birds of a feather session and a real-time demonstration. The real-time addition and subtraction of fabric and memory components using Gen-Z. We're going to show that off. We're going to be able to associate compute clients with memory resources. We're just going to generally bring OFMF to the wider HPC-focused audience. Next slide. With the goal of getting additional fabrics interested in to drive more redfish models and OFMF framework features. We're also wanting to build use cases. We're expecting with our introduction that we'll have at the Birds of the Feather session and the demonstration that we'll get interested parties that will have other use cases that we haven't considered. We're also expecting that they'll bring more people in to help with development and get input from vendors and clients so that we can determine what they can use. So thank you.
And thank you, Mike. That's a great introduction. I really appreciate it. And we remind everyone we will have a chance to ask questions of Mike and of Hiren coming up. So with that, let me pass it on to Hiren and have him give us an update on Gen-Z.
Cool. Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Sure can.
Good. All right, good deal. Thank you, Kurtis. Yeah, my name is Hiren. I'm the CEO and founder of IntelliProp. I've been recently elected as the Gen-Z Consortium president. You may have to excuse my background. IntelliProp is located in Colorado and ski season's about to start. So I am excited to be here and talk about Gen-Z and the work we're doing with the OFA. Next slide. Oh, sorry, you're already on the next slide, Rachel. Thank you. It's very exciting to see groups come together to move the industry forward. And I'm glad to be here to talk about what these two great organizations have done so far and what's next. Just a little bit of recap on Gen-Z. We're coming up on our 5th year anniversary from our launch in 2016. Gen-Z has developed and released several specifications, participated in industry events. We've also done some great work in defining the Gen-Z management stack. Gen-Z is looking forward to participating in SC21 and developing new connected technology demos. Gen-Z was a harbinger of new requirements and are continuing our work with the OFA to fine-tune our efforts together. With our work with the OFA, we'd like to continue making an evolutionary impact on the industry. Next slide. Diving a little bit deeper into what we have done and we're doing, Gen-Z has released a fabric management specification in August of 2020. This spec defines how software manages the Gen-Z fabric and components. It also provides a development structure for software management of Gen-Z hardware. Our cooperation with OFA includes weekly technical meetings that are open meetings attended by both Gen-Z technical representatives as well as others. These meetings establish functional divisions and interface definitions. They also develop interoperability testing activities and discuss event demos. So all of this should lead to a great demo by both organizations at SC21. Continuing on with what we have done and are doing together between OFA and Gen-Z, this slide shows the breakdown of the work the two organizations are doing and where the functional divisions are drawn. The blue blocks were defined by the OFA, and the interface between the OFA stack and the Gen-Z management stack, which is shown in orange, is redfish. The fabric agent, which is shown at the top of the Gen-Z stack in orange, is the translation entity, which consumes redfish at its northbound interface and translates that into Gen-Z fabric requests. The conceptual idea here is that with this fabric agent abstraction, it allows the OFA, OFMF services to be as generic as possible, which then allows it to be reused across multiple fabric types. Stepping down into the stack a little bit further, the GenZ Fabric Manager is a piece of software named Zephyr. The Zephyr is the entity which performs the GenZ Fabric specific operations, some things such as recursively walking out across the fabric to discover fabric topology, resources, and switch components. Zephyr then makes a connection through the fabric to the Fabric Manager in blue to communicate with all the components connected to the fabric. Zephyr communicates via its northbound path with the fabric agent that we talked about earlier. And that fabric agent then communicates with the OFMF services via a redfish model. So GenZ as a specification does allow for distributed fabric managers, but what we're showing here or depicting here is a single node fabric manager, and each host node runs its own local management service, which is codenamed Llamas. Llamas then communicates with the bridge hardware using Linux drivers, and those Linux drivers are hardware vendor specific. For this particular topology, we're using IntelliProp bridges, switches, and endpoint hardware. We have created an entire Linux subsystem for GenZ, which is available on GitHub for review. So thanks, Rachel. This diagram depicts all of the pieces working in a fabric topology in our current demo. Here we have Zephyr running on top of Llamas on one of the hardware bridges. The other hardware bridge only has the Llamas local manager running. Both bridges have GenZ Linux drivers. The demos we're showing today are on an FPGA with embedded ARM processors. And finally, the entire GenZ Fabric demo consists of GenZ hosts, bridges, GenZ switch, and several GenZ memory modules. Next slide. Thanks. So what's next for this collaboration? Near term, we have OFMF interoperability testing with the GenZ management stack. The GenZ Fabric, as shown on the previous slide, is in the IntelliProp lab today, and remote access has been or will be provided for OFMF developers. These tests include device management from the OFMF interface, and then a dynamic visual representation of the GenZ Fabric. The target is to do a public demonstration of this work at Supercompute 21. Further or future development tasks include refinement of the management stack, support for additional GenZ bridges, expanding that fabric topology we were talking about earlier, and finally expanding the redfish OFMF requests. In summary, the two organizations are working together and making an evolutionary impact. This is the first implementation of industry standard fabric management framework. It can be a launch pad for standard management of other fabrics, and it also provides a template for technical collaboration. We're expanding disaggregation of historically locally attached components by making them fabric attached. Then we're using an open source management framework to manage these new fabric attached components. And finally, we're setting a precedent and providing a template for cooperation between the OFA and other fabric providers. How can you get involved and join us? If you want to get involved with the OFMF, it's an open membership to the OFA. Volunteer to contribute code or test. Materials are available on the GitHub repository, and you can join up through the OFA website. For those that want to get involved with the GenZ Fabric Management, this is also on GitHub, and you can contact us through the GenZ website, and feel free to volunteer to collaborate, code, or test. Join the GenZ Consortium if you're not already members, and you can visit our website to learn more. Please stay tuned for regular updates, or next slide, stop by our booth and come see the demo live at SC21. We'll be running the demo in 3 booths. Booth 1707, which is the GenZ booth, booth 1507, the Open Standards Pavilion, and 1715, the IntelliProp booth. Luckily, in the little zoom out, you can see all of these booths are next to each other. So thank you for your time and learning about the exciting work we're doing. Back to you, Kurtis.
Hey, Hiren, thank you very much. Excellent information. I ended up with a lot of questions, and then you answered them toward the end. I'm really looking forward to seeing that demo. So now we're moving into what we're calling the fireside chat time. And so we've got a number of experts in the industry joining us here. They have a lot of information. And so I'm just going to go through and kind of start to ask some questions of the people and give you a chance to hear what they're saying. And actually, I wanted to start with Mike. One of the things that I really wanted you to be able to kind of tell the story. I know that you and I and Barry met at Supercompute a few years back to really talk about starting this whole open fabrics piece that turned into the open fabrics management framework. And wondered if you could just give us a little bit of history, what kind of brought it on, and how you got caught up in all of it.
We were really intrigued with the idea of making a centralized framework that would make things easier for consumers of fabrics to have a central location and central tool set to make their applications and their fabrics and centralize things, so that we thought we could get more, make things easier to build different types of applications that haven't been built before, because people were always using the same methodologies and having to customize things for each fabric. So we thought by bringing everything together into one central tool set, that you'd be able to come up with new novel solutions that would use this framework as a central piece to have a central and type of tool set that was across every fabric. So that was what was the interesting thing for us.
Yeah, and I remember listening to you at lunch talk about that, and then kind of the light bulb went off for me when you're like, hey, this can control virtually any fabric. And we need a fabric to kind of start with, and Gen Z was in its early days. We were still working on that fabric management spec that Hiren talked about, and saw some great opportunities to kind of put the two groups together, build on that synergy. And one of the great things was OFA already had some interested programmers to jump into it, which was an area that Gen Z wasn't as far down the path on. And so to me, that's one of the things that really made this interesting. And in fact, I think has taken it to the next level. I don't know. I'm trying to remember back that far, but it seems to me like one of the things that occurred was once we kind of got the general, yeah, that looks good, we jumped into some early meetings to define the architecture. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you figured out the best way to put all this together?
So we started with a lot of different use cases where we kind of pinned down what the fabric manager would look like at first, and then the components that would match each fabric. And then we kind of decided, well, as we were working towards the Gen Z fabric, what would work the best with the Gen Z fabric, but still be extensible to other fabrics as we went along. There was a lot of discussion over almost a year's time to kind of drill down to decide what the OFMF was going to look like, and who was going to be, what we needed for tools underneath, for instance, redfish and swordfish.
Excellent.
And
well, thank you. I mean, I agree with you. I remember sitting in on some of the first meetings, and just the collaboration of all these industry players coming together to help define it was really exciting. Actually, let me pick on somebody else. Maybe Phil, if I could have you answer this question, let others join in. Why do we need this in the industry? What really is the driving factor behind it?
So, and that's a really good question. It's something that I love to talk about. So I am always been passionate, and so and it's also the OFA, with standards-based and vendor-independent and open source management tools for an entire ecosystem management, for efficiently being able to take a heterogeneous data center or HPC environment and manage it in such a way that you're not stopping your scale-out capabilities, that you're enabling workloads to get to the data or the engines they need, no matter where they sit, in a way that doesn't require specialized management by specific vendor solutions. If we have an API that people can use to get from workloads to their needs, if that's hardware needs or data needs, anywhere in the ecosystem, that's something that this will enable and help. And that's why I'm also excited when we partner with folks like the Gen-Z and SNIA and DMTF. And so we come up with a synergy of expertise in this space to help the entire ecosystem.
I agree. Yeah, that's perfect. Other people, other thoughts on kind of why it's needed? Anybody want to jump in?
Let me just talk about this a little bit from the storage perspective. One of the things that we've had for a very long time is a pent-up demand for folks to be able to manage their storage fabrics and to do that in a standardized way. And that demand is just increasing as we get more and more new types of underlying technologies. Well, in order to be able to do that, though, we have to have the base fabric management in place. So, we're very excited about, and I'm working with both the Redfish side and the Swordfish side in this project. On the Redfish side, helping to get all that base instrumentation so that it's there, so that I can switch hats, go back to SNIA, and we can actually start working on getting some of those storage fabric management specific work applications in place, so that functionality developed. So things like performance, workload management, performance instrumentation, and all of those things that are a little bit more specific on the storage side. So we find it just hugely beneficial and very exciting, as storage fabrics management is a growing area of demand from a standards perspective.
I mean, just as data at rest or data in only one place really isn't all that useful, accelerators or hardware capabilities in a data center, if I can't get to them, or if I can't get to them efficiently, or if every time I need another resource I need to administrate it, it's not an efficient solution.
Yeah, that's well put. Yeah, if you've got to put somebody in the data center every time you want to change a little bit of a configuration, it is a very labor-intensive, time-consuming task. So
either that, or you're using something like scripts and it's not dynamic.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, Hiren, you kind of talked a little bit about how you can get involved in what you were saying. Anybody want to talk about kind of what are the skill sets that you need? I know you talked about some programming and testing, but give me a little bit more on that. What kind of things would help this effort move forward?
Yeah, I think I'm going to defer to Erich and Russ maybe on that. Sorry. I do have a question for you. Who brought the marshmallows and graham crackers and chocolate? I'm kidding. Erich, you want to answer some of these?
Sure, no problem. So it looks like Hiren, Kurtis, and I all shop at the same shirt vendor. So yeah, so I think Hiren touched on it. Programmers and really folks to just start banging on this and testing it out is important. Expertise level, a lot of the fabric management is written in Python. So I think Python is super easy. From a programming perspective, the hardest thing is to know all the infinite number of libraries that are available and how to leverage them, right? So really just folks that want to start contributing, start learning, writing test scripts, testing out deployments. As Hiren mentioned, we're starting to open up a VPN into our lab to let people start to actually play with real hardware and real fabrics. We have some of the software-only emulators that we're leveraging as well. So that's been very useful. Yeah, I mean, I would just say Python expertise, programmers, test engineers, people who just want to learn. Those are the type of folks that we're looking for.
I'd also say people that are passionate about a number of fabrics. Gen Z certainly being the foremost and the first fabric, but this needs to be agnostic to all fabrics.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, well stated. Russ, I'm going to bring you into this as well. Can you talk about the other fabrics that you are exploring?
Well, obviously, we're looking at Slingshot, for instance, and Infiniband. We need good expertise on Infiniband to make sure that all of the redfish objects that we're defining offer the appropriate management knobs at an abstracted level, so that your Infiniband fabrics can be managed using the OFMF framework. So it's very important to get representation and expertise from all the major fabrics so that we have a good, solid, flexible base of objects that we model the fabric with, because that's the whole principle of the OFMF. You take the fabric, you abstract it into basically redfish models, and you control the redfish models and manipulate those. And then you have a provider or an agent that takes those redfish operations and converts them to fabric-specific changes and requests to your fabric-specific management layer. And for it to be truly universal, we have to have quite a bit of representation of all the different fabrics represented.
As this comes out, is the idea it'll make it easier to manage a multi-fabric environment, or are you still going to be kind of managing one fabric at a time, but with a common interface? What do you see long term?
Well, I think it's both. I think for high-level application programmers, they want to build their applications on top of things like OpenSHMEM or OpenFAM, and they don't want to have fabric-specific things reflected up into their application layer. So they want their libraries to handle any differences in fabrics. And so for that to happen, you have to have either a different provider at the library level for each of the different fabrics, or you have to have a common programming model for those fabrics, those different fabrics that the libraries can all write to. So it's designed to make it easier for application writers and the library writers to control the fabrics, particularly for new features that they didn't have to worry about before. Currently, OpenSHMEM shared memory is donated by all the nodes that are part of the cluster. With the advent of fabric attached memory, you're going to be requesting memory from a third party. And so how do you do that? Well, we're putting hooks in place in the redfish models, and in the OFMF, we're creating a template process for how to request that memory and how to attach to it and how to manage it. And so it's designed to work with multiple fabrics and multiple applications, and provide a framework so that you can make your code portable, or you can make your in execution environment, multiple fabric enabled. So you can have multiple fabrics because your apps all speak and your admin tools all speak the same OFMF management model language.
Excellent. All right.
At the end of the day, applications want to get to their resources. They don't need or want to have to care how they get there. That should be up to policy and administration.
That makes sense. You know, something that Mike, you said a couple times was incorporating security. Obviously, as you start to come across multiple fabrics and multiple resources on those fabrics, security becomes a keen issue. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of what security means when you're in the OFMF environment?
Yeah, we're talking about multiple different features that we built out with the use cases, and one of them was the ability to separate the fabric based on workloads, and then the ability to have one central set of commands, like Russ was just talking about, where you use those central commands to across all the fabrics to control the fabric, to instantiate the fabric components, resources, and that makes it so that you can control the fabric with one easy to control set of tools. So that's what we're kind of thinking about. So
okay. Let me pick on Erich a minute. So Hiren talked a little bit about, hey, come by and see this demo. Are you guys ready to give us a little preview of what it is we're going to see?
Yeah, I don't have a live demo set up for right now, but I can happily talk about what we'll be showing. So we have a relatively small fabric, but a fabric that is configured as multi-dimensional HyperX topology. We have 4 main host nodes and then 2 management nodes, multiple levels of switches, and those also fan out to media boxes. One of the things that we'll be showing off is the ability to support multipathing through the fabric. And one of the demos that we're looking at doing is having a customer or a user come up and pull one of the QSFP cables out of a switch, and we'll be able to represent the change in topology dynamically with a tool called NetworkX, so we can do real-time updates of how that topology has changed, but also continuation of the application that was running to that resource. It'll keep running, right? So that's one of the demos that we'll be showing. We'll also have some semblance of a user interface that we can, either script or implement changes into the fabric and then see those changes reflected by that same visualization tool via NetworkX. So some of the details we're still working and polishing at this point, but that's sort of a high level overview of what we'll be showing off.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing that in about 45 days.
Yeah, coming up.
Coming up quick.
Yep.
Now, Richelle, as a member of SNIA, an OFA, we see how everything is interplaying here. Can you talk a little bit about what SNIA brings to the table, DMTF brings to the table when it talks about an effort this large?
Sure, thanks. So just as a quick note for anyone who's not aware of what Swordfish is different from Redfish, Swordfish is the storage specific extension. So SNIA brings that storage, that expertise. But what Redfish and Swordfish together bring is a whole integrated standards-based management ecosystem that covers servers, storage, and networking. And so SNEA is very involved in this, as I mentioned earlier, to try and get those storage use cases in there. But from a redfish and swordfish perspective, we're both DMTF and SNEA are very excited to be participating with this because it just helps demonstrate the, and work on flushing out that existing redfish fabric model and turning, providing additional consumers and providers, both sides of the ecosystem, for that model to be complete. The redfish fabric model has been in existence for a few years, but one of the things we need to do is really, as we walk through every new fabric type, make sure that all the instrumentation is really fleshed out. And that's one of the things that redfish and swordfish are both taking away from this, especially this initial effort, flushing out all those redfish models and making sure that we have kind of a truly comprehensive management ecosystem defined in the standards.
It's really great to see all these standard bodies coming together. I don't know if we could do this if just one group was trying to do that heavy lift. So thank you on behalf of Gen Z. I want to thank you, the SNEA folks. Really, it's been a good relationship there. Obviously, the OFA folks and then the DMTF folks with Redfish. So yeah, fantastic. Let me kind of wrap up this section with, what else do you want? Let people know, and I'll open it up to the panel. What kind of things would you like to talk to the group about? And maybe I'll even pick on people. I'll start with Phil.
Well, most thing I'd like people to know is that membership in the OFA isn't required to participate. If you just want to go to some of the working groups and get your thoughts and your leadership and help with architecture and programming, you're welcome to do so without actually forming the joining the OFA. Of course, joining the OFA is all cool because it gets you opportunities to do other things. But we're open and we are encouraging participation.
Excellent. Yeah, and actually, as long as you bring that up, tell me the little difference between open like OFA is, maybe open like Gen Z is, and then other groups are less open. So, that's one of the things I was impressed about OSAs. They're what I call open. What was the philosophy as you were forming that thought in OFA of, everything is open, the meeting minutes are open, the whole group is an open group. What got you down that path?
That's actually a really good question. And so the OFA actually predates my involvement. OFA has been around since 2004, June of 2004. It's been around quite a while, and it's actually gone through a number of iterations and mission statements, since that time. But the point is, we want to honestly, the OFA has always been trying to benefit the entire advanced networks ecosystem. It's mainly over its lifetime been concerned with RDMA style technologies, but it's expanding beyond that for the entire, whatever the cloud and the hyperconverged markets need. And so it's been open source, vendor independent, really just trying to create opportunities for collaboration, both with its work groups and with its annual workshop. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to make sure people had a chance to say that. But
Yeah.
Richelle, you had something to add?
I actually, I think that the OFA model partners really well with the standards models because groups like OFA can come in and, build on the existing standards, help, define reference implementations, and focus on what are the really important use cases for a segment, in this case, fabrics and fabric management. And that partners really well with the other groups that are developing those underlying standards that the OFA can then build upon.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I really have always appreciated that the OFA really brings people and brings groups together to increase the synergies and the expertise for pretty much the benefit of everyone. So if people want to play nicely together, we're a great place to do that. Yep,
I agree.
Yeah. And also one other thing too, I want to make sure is that people know that we hatch software that gets with the intention of bringing it to the industry and keeping it open source. Okay. So, for instance, we did that with the RDMA stack. So.
Yeah, and that was ported to just about every major operating system, and as a good open source project.
Yeah, well, outstanding, and thank you for the contributions to the industry that really has helped everyone grow and take advantage of that. Erich, Hiren, or Russ, any last thoughts before we move on to the Q&A section?
I'll give one. Again, maybe people don't know this who are new to the call. So in a similar vein to the OFA being open, the GenZ Linux subsystem is work that is available open source on GitHub. We've been working with a group of companies trying to bring this open source development to a broader group of folks in a group that I call the GLSS or GenZ Linux subsystem that meets every other Thursday. So that's the Linux subsystem for GenZ. Also, the Zephyr Fabric Manager and a bunch of utilities have been developed and open sourced up on GitHub as well. So just so people are aware, and if they want to take a look or help contribute, welcome that both of those as well.
Excellent. All right, well, let's move then to the Q&A session. And Rachel, the idea is if you have a question, put it in chat.
Yep, that will work. I think that's the perfect solution.
All right, so if you've got any questions, please put them into the chat. If not, I'm going to take a few questions that we got prior to this through some email and such, and maybe start with those. One of the questions kind of was, what does it take to build your own fabric manager? And could you use, maybe not getting this right, but could you use something like our solution on Fibre Channel? So maybe I'll hand that one to Mike. You've kind of shown the different use cases. Is Fibre Channel something that could be targeted for this fabric manager?
Yeah, we are targeting all types of fabrics, and Fibre Channel is one of them. So I haven't seen too many use cases yet with it. I think Richelle brought it up a couple times in some meetings offhand. I don't know if Richelle's got any more information on that.
Yeah, so as Mike says, the goal is to try and target all the different kinds of fabrics. From obviously historical storage perspective, Fibre Channel is a big one for us to be looking at. It's not in one of the initial fabrics we're looking at, but we want to be able to support all of that. There's actually a fair amount of instrumentation already in place in the Redfish fabric models to cover Fibre Channel, simply because as folks have been working on developing that, we've pre-enabled things that we know about, and we know about Fibre Channel. Where we expect to see this potentially cross over is when we're looking at the NVMe over fabrics. There's existing implementations that some of our member companies are working on in the NVMe over Fibre Channel, as well as a lot of work going on in NVMe over Ethernet. So from a storage perspective, we could expect to see a fair number, at least a fair amount of interest in the Fibre Channel use cases here.
And hopefully, even new fabrics that haven't really hit the mainstream yet. I mean, the idea would be to create a template such that you could, take the fabrics that are currently supported and implement a new fabric model management in Open Fabrics Management Framework.
Makes perfect sense. Next question was kind of how far along is the effort, and when is this something that's ready to deploy? Who wants to take that one? I know there's a lot of effort. Maybe Russ, you've been quiet for a while. I'll pick on you.
Well, I think that the major effort or focus in the last month or two has been on getting a demo put together. And so we've had a restricted amount of use case and functionality that we are trying to implement. And as far as what comes next or how soon we would be ready to check in, say, a reference code set for a more robust set of features, it depends on getting some more help to write that code and getting some more use cases gathered up for other fabrics to make sure that we have the appropriate pieces. If you can model it, then we can build an OFMF instance that will manage it. But we're still working through the details of modeling the new features that are brought on with Gen Z, like fabric attached memory and how to allocate it and how to bind it. And so if you want it sooner, we're going to need help. I couldn't guess a timeline for when we would have a fully functional thing for any given fabric. The only one that we're actively working on is Gen Z.
Right, and then as we've been developing over probably the last 3 months, I would say, Michael, we've having this idea. Is it for the POC, which is what we're concentrating on, or is it something that we need to concentrate on later as a more general purpose, but not in the POC? So I absolutely agree with Russ.
Okay, so my takeaway from that is, hey, you've got something you can play with now in a limited fashion, and if you want to get it there faster, join us. Okay, well, great. That's all of the questions that I have. So I'd like to first thank our esteemed panel. Really appreciate the time you put in to get ready for this and to present this out to the group. Thank you to Rachel for coordinating all of that. And then to the folks on the line, if you want to get involved, if you want to know more about either of these organizations, please visit the websites. You've got the openfabrics.org or genz.org sites that you can go to. And we'd love to have you help in this effort, whether that's on the programming side, the testing side, or someplace else where you feel like you can join in. The meetings are ongoing. So with that, I will bring this to a close and thank everyone for participating.
Thank you.